Today I'm going to talk to you about whether or not an Ethereum ETF, a spot ETF, is incoming, whether or not that's possible. Now, when I go over this video, I'm going to go talk really fast, by the way, because I have a lot to say. I think it's going to be the most comprehensive video on the subject. But just remember, when I talk about centralization, it's only in context in reference to the spot ETF. Otherwise, I think it's going to be it could be really tough to take over Ethereum because it's very expensive to acquire if you want to control it. So this is only in the context of an Ethereum spot ETF. So let's get going quickly because I've got 19 slides to talk to you about. Okay, the first one, so what's Ethereum doing? Ethereum's been pretty weak, especially compared to Bitcoin, but lately it's been going up, and that's because, and only because, Bitcoin's price has gone up, and there's been a lot of excitement over the Bitcoin spot ETF, which got approved by the SEC on January 9th, I believe. And there's a lot of pros and cons, people saying there's going to be a spot ETF because the regulators believe Ethereum's not a security. Some are saying regulators are saying it's not a security. It is a security. It's a mixed bag. I'm going to give you some examples right here. The CFTC, and this headline here says Ethereum and Litecoins are commodities in a new lawsuit that just came out. And also when they passed and approved the Bitcoin and Ethereum futures, the CFTC said that Ethereum is a commodity. However, the SEC has not confirmed that. Gary Gensler's numerous SEC testimonies have not confirmed that Ethereum is not a security, that it's a commodity. It's not been true. Ethereum, before I go on, I'm going to talk to you quickly about how I rated it, because I have a rating scorecard of about a dozen factors. I rate Ethereum high. Before I do that, maybe I should tell you what Ethereum is for those who have been living under a rock. Ethereum is, I'm going to talk fast now, a distributed blockchain platform for smart contracts and decentralized applications. This includes DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, that's for governance and voting, and of course, meme coins. And Ethereum now uses, the POS, proof of stake, as of September 2022. So under my ratings framework, I rate Ethereum holistically an A, meaning some factors are good and some are bad, or strong and some are weak. So I rate it weak for scalability, as we all know about. It's very expensive, a lot of high gas fees, especially when the platform and project is congested, and it's ranked weak, and I'll talk about this later, for decentralization, and somewhat below average for user experience, especially if you're going from layer 2s to layer 1. Gets a bit complicated. However, it's rated A or excellent for developers, as number one highest number of devs. Its management team is excellent and has very high social engagement and the best tokenomics. The tokenomics, believe it or not, is actually better than Bitcoin because Ethereum is disinflationary right now, as Bitcoin is inflationary because Bitcoin has 1.8% inflation, which is going to be halved on around April 19th to 0.8%. But right now, Ethereum is more Bitcoin-like and more like digital gold than Bitcoin. Who knew? The Bitcoin experience. So the ETF experience for Bitcoin has been a smashing success. And you can look at this. If you go to Dune Analytics, you can see on a per day basis how much inflows are going into the Bitcoin spot ETF. And it's been huge. It's been the most successful ETF in history. Over the last few days, however, there have been some outflows, but I think over time it's going to be consistent and strong. So consistent inflows over time. And remember, miners only producing 900 Bitcoin a day, and that's going to go down in half. So there's a lot more demand than there is supply for Bitcoin. the spot market. Now I'm going to be talking about different types of markets. It's going to be a little complex because there's all kinds of markets. Again, there's the spot market, the futures market, and then there's ETFs based on those futures. And this is for Ethereum. So let's get started with the spot market for Ethereum. So this market is very good. It's similar to Bitcoin. I'm not going to talk to you about all the points or all the reasons why, but I'll just list you 2 or 3 of them. The first one is the spot market for Ethereum is very large. As I said before, it has no inflation. It's considered an institutional blockchain. It's been around for a decade. So under Lindy's law, is that Lindy's? Am I pronouncing it right? Lindy's Deli. It hasn't been broken yet, so it's lasting forever. Something about Lindy's law. It's also considered almost like a safe haven within a crypto market. It has a high liquidity score. If you look all the way to the right, the column that says liquidity score, that's a very high liquidity score. And this comes from CoinMarketCap. So here we rated A. So this is a good pro of why Ethereum should be or should have approval by the SEC for a spot ETF. The futures market is also rated highly. There's a very large Ethereum futures market. The CFTC says it's a commodity. Lots of open interest. As I said, we've got about $12 billion, $12 to $13 billion in open interest right now. And on an annualized basis, looking at short-term numbers, it's far higher. I calculate up to $17 billion in open interest if you annualize what's going on in the last month or two. Now here are where things are not so great for Ethereum. So if you're looking at ETFs for Ethereum, but not a spot ETF for Ethereum, because that's what we're waiting for approval on. What we have now in existence are what's called ETFs on Ethereum futures. And there, Ethereum is failing, or those ETFs are failing because they have high expenses, very low trading volume, very low AUMs, huge tracking error. I mean, there's so many negatives there. And in this chart here, and this is for ProShares, I showed you just one negative aspect. And here it shows you the tracking error is huge for this ETF. Remember, this is the largest ETF future, and it's still tracking horribly. So if the SEC takes a look at this, they're going to say, wait a minute. If there's no interest from consumers, for users, for investors on an ETF, let me repeat that, on an ETH futures ETF, why in the heck would they be interest from investors for a spot ETF? So I think this is something to watch out for. Next, this is favoring Ethereum. BlackRock's involved. Remember, it's been said that what BlackRock wants, BlackRock gets. And we saw that with the spot Bitcoin ETF. As soon as Larry Fink got involved, the spot ETF was passed for and approved by the SEC for Bitcoin. So now people are saying, hey, if BlackRock's involved, and you can see this headline right here, if they're involved, they're going to have the political power to push it through with the SEC. I don't know. Next, the Howey Test. In 1946, the Supreme Court put out what's called the Howey Test. And in this case, Ethereum is not similar to Bitcoin. I'm not going to go through every one of these. You could print this out and take a look at it on your own. But I'm going to give you 1 or 2 factors. Before I do that, I want to talk to you about the summary judgment. Everyone's hailing the summary judgment on Ripple Labs as meaning a win for the crypto community, and meaning that Bitcoin, the spot Bitcoin ETF, could be approved because of this win, the summary judgment, but not so fast. If you look at the details of that summary judgment, they said that institutional sales of XRP met the Howey test, meaning it's a security. So I believe that Ethereum also meets the Howey test in terms of it being a security. And I'll give you some reasons why. You can see here in the top left, investment of money, common enterprise, pooling of assets, dependent on others. And they call this an AIP. I think it's in the next slide. Basically, investors are dependent on the efforts of others, a third party, to vouch for them and to manage the assets for them. And they also, in the bottom right, they expect profits. And this all started, I should give you a background. The Howey test had to do with the case in 1946 when investors gave a third party money to manage an orange grove in Florida. That's how it all got started. But you may say, oh, this is 1946. Crypto didn't exist back then, right? It became in existence in 2009. But if you look at the next slide, the SEC put out a framework recently for the Howey test so that it applies today, now. And I mentioned AIP or AP, that's an active participant. So if you look at the top here, we have a few things that have changed. Number one, reasonable expectation of profits. I think that investors are expecting profits from Ethereum. So that's going to be an issue with the Howey test. Efforts of others, I mentioned that already. Investors are expecting that from an active participant or third party. They're expecting Vitalik Buterin to manage Ethereum properly. Remember, in Bitcoin, there is no Vitalik, right? We don't even know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. And third, the chain is fully operational. Okay, that's okay. Ethereum meets that. Ethereum is fully operational. But if you look on the bottom here, it says here that, I'm going to read this to you. Although no one of the following characteristics or use or consumption is determinative, the stronger the presence, the less likely the Howey test is met. So basically, if you read the last point, it's saying that, or the first 3 points, it's saying that if the asset like Ethereum is developed, it doesn't meet the Howey test, so it's not a security. However, I would argue that it might be a security on the last point here where I put an X, because it says here that investors could want the asset to go up, or they're treating the asset as a speculative asset. So sorry, this is confusing. I'm reading this to you fast because there's a lot to say. Let's go to the next one. Nakamoto coefficient. This is one number that tells you whether or not the chain is centralized or decentralized. If the number is high, meaning it's above 10 or 20, it's good. If it's low, it's bad. And if you look at Ethereum, it's only 2. 2 is bad, meaning it is not sufficiently decentralized. And I think the SEC is going to look at this number and say that the Ethereum chain is centralized. And of course, we know that there's many other things to look at in determining whether or not a chain is decentralized. For example, did you know that Ethereum has over 1.3 million validators? So that sounds decentralized to me. But if you're looking at the pooling level, and there's different ways of looking at that, and here I'm just focused on staking. If you look at the pooling level, there was no pooling. There was no staking because Ethereum was a proof of work chain. But then in September 2022, it moved from proof of work proof of stake. And as time goes on, that staking percentage is going to go up from 0 into what it is now. As it's 25% now, it's going to go higher and higher and higher, since it's probably going to be an institutional favorite, because staking gives a yield. It's probably going to be much higher than 25%. So the problem is that there's a lot of ways with staking. Before I say what the problem is, let me tell you, there's a lot of ways of staking. You can stake it on your own, on your home computer. You can do liquid restaking like Lido. You can do staking pools that are non-custodial. Or you can use liquid restaking, or you can use centralized exchanges like Coinbase, Fidelity, KuCoin, Binance. Now let's focus only on Ethereum staking, and that's Lido. If you look at just Lido alone, Lido has 31% of that staked coin on the network. That's a huge amount of control to the third party. So we have to be careful there. And then you can see Coinbase has 14%, and Fidelity gets in the game. You know they're going to be very high too. Then there's also what's growing in popularity. I mean, huge. This is going to be huge. And this is what's called eigenlayer. And this is what's also called liquid restaking. Here on the right-hand column, they call it LRT, liquid restaking. Now, I looked into this. It sounds like hypothecation of Ethereum. So you can read this on your own. But I looked into it. This is not rehypothecation. So it's not using that collateral and then using it again and again and again in an almost pyramid scheme of I can't say that word. Hypothecating that coin. So that's a good thing. But however, there is added risk. So you don't have direct leverage, but you have indirect leverage, number one. Number two, you have the risk of staking at dApps that are very small and risky. Because if you know what liquid restaking is, you're using that Ethereum as collateral to stake in smaller, riskier chains. So there is more risk. But what I want to talk to you in the context of this presentation is that what's going to happen is eigenlayer on the ether.fi, I think that's what it's called, is going to have a larger and larger proportion of those staked ETH. So if you go to the previous slide, you can see they're listed as one of the top, I think it's top 5 platforms. And you know that platform's going to grow higher and higher as liquid restaking becomes popular. Next slide. Then there's also the issue of centralization at the cloud or web hosted level. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but hosting comprises about 50% of the validated nodes, and within that, 36% alone is just to Amazon Web Services, AWS. And Hetzner, if you add them all together, comprises 19% of validators. And remember, they can just, because it's under a centralized company, they could just pull the plug. And this is exactly what happened to Solana, I guess about 1 to 2 years ago. The German web hosting company pulled the plug from Solana. And so this could happen to Ethereum from AWS or Hetzner. There's also something called diversity at the client software level. I'm not going to talk to you too much about this. No one knows about this. The only reason I'm talking to you about this now is because everyone's talking about Solana, that they're going to be developing Fire Dancer and have it ready by November 2024. And that's been delayed, by the way. But if you look at Ethereum, they've done a good job at trying to decentralize the validator client software. And they've done it in numerous ways. You could read it. You could read this on your own. But basically, in this area, they've done a good job versus most other blockchains. Now, there's another issue of if you're talking about control. Can the government censor Ethereum? And my answer to you is yes. If you look at the Foreign Assets Control, Office of Foreign Assets Control, also known as OFAC, they can censor up to 40%, and that's in red here. It's considered OFAC compliant. They can censor 40% of the blocks. So under my definition, that's considered control. Also, crypto purists view code as a form of freedom of speech. So under our definition, this means centralization. But oddly, and here it gets really ironic, oddly, this type of control may be considered a good thing if we're looking towards an ETF approval by the SEC, because the SEC, as you know, is a U.S. government entity, and they like all this kind of stuff. They like the OFAC compliance. They like the anti-money laundering compliance, know your customer, KYC. So this is a good thing in terms of a proposed SEC approval. Now, here's the thing. Anecdotal evidence does not support an ETF approval. I'll give you one or two. And some of these I got from Eric Bashunas over at Bloomberg. He says there's only a 30% likelihood of an Ethereum ETF by May 2024. And I think there's going to be no Ethereum approval, spot approval, until who knows when, maybe 2025 or 2026. I think we need a new U.S. Congress and a new SEC chairperson in order to get this approved. That's my view. Eric Bashunas says there's been radio silence. Those are his words, because there's been very little activity between the SEC and the issuers, or the proposed issuers of a spot ETF for Ethereum. For example, there's no trust being formed, CUSIP numbers. You don't see the Ethereum issuers like Blackrock having all these meetings with the SEC like they did prior to the Bitcoin spot approval. And recently, Fortune Crypto announced that the SEC was doing some investigations on companies that work with Ethereum Foundation. So ain't looking good, guys. Sorry. So in conclusion, while I think it'll be very difficult for Ethereum to actually be controlled by a malicious actor, I don't think the SEC is going to view Ethereum as sufficiently decentralized or passing the Howey Test. I don't think they're going to view Ethereum as being a commodity in order to approve the Ethereum spot ETF, despite of Mr. Hinman's 2018 speech in which he said Ethereum was a commodity. Because remember, the nature and form of Ethereum has changed since that speech, because it moved from proof of work to proof of stake. So the question to you, my friends, is not if, but when. I think there will definitely be an Ethereum ETF, but not until there's a new administration and a new Congress. And this is not going to be until 2025. Well, thank you all for listening, my friends. And please smash that like button and subscribe to us. Bye-bye.